I've been good. Definitely working on a lot of things at the moment. Um, but I've been good. There's a lot of uh, kind of organizations that I've started being a part of, and a lot of like opportunities that I've gotten to, be able to do in the sustainable fashion space, which is very exciting. I definitely feel there's a lot more alignment with the kind of work that I'm doing, even in comparison to like a year ago. Uh, so that's exciting. Yeah. So sustainable fashion is kind of what I like to call how we're beginning to kind of correct what has been happening that has been causing negative impact in the fashion industry. So it has a lot to do with the fibers we're using in comparison to the fibers we were using when the industry first began. And it also has a lot to do with our consumption as consumers, and maybe how we're also dealing with the waste crisis, because I think the inherent problem with the fashion industry right now is that we're overproducing and we're not able to kind of counter that. So there's a lot of landfill being created and a lot of waste, in rivers and just all types of pollution. Yeah. I think we've been dealt with kind of like an interesting scenario when it comes to how we consume and I guess what products we do consume. Consumption has become super mindless since mass production began. And I think it has forced consumers to rely so much on material things, um, which is just creating that imbalance that we were kind of talking about. So I definitely feel maybe I don't have any remedies to maybe what everyone could be doing, because that would kind of take understanding, different lifestyles, and that is broken down, where we live in Africa. So what sustainability is in Africa might not be the same as what it is in the West, or in the East. So I think maybe I can speak to how I personally choose sustainability in my day-to-day life. Definitely when it comes to clothing, I think something that's super important to me is not buying new. Um, I can say that I have potentially not been participating in fast fashion for the last 4 years. But even to be able to get to that point kind of took a lot of consciousness, because at some point I was living like in London, where I mean, it's the height of consumerism. So it's very hard to kind of like remove yourself when you're living in that kind of space. But yeah, I think because I have access to secondhand markets, and with the pandemic, a lot of what we were seeing in Nairobi is that markets were moving kind of from the physical to the online. So I have all my favorite like Instagram shops that I thrift from. And that kind of gives me a great satisfaction. I think the burden really is on consumers to kind of just consider that there are so many garments already in existence, I think. And if we are not kind of taking care of that problem, I think it gravely also affects like lower income communities, and that's problematic for multiple reasons. They're already kind of like circumstances that they've been put in, and on top of that, the waste, not necessarily like of Africans, it's definitely waste from like the West and all these kinds of places, but it's still a burden that I think we all have to carry. Also, in terms of like supporting the people who are selling the secondhand clothing, I think that's super important. That industry also has its complexities, but I believe it's really important to do that. So, the Nothing New is my little creative baby. Um, currently it operates as a kind of learning resource for people who may not be like familiar with sustainable fashion, but also kind of are. I think it was super important for me when I moved back to Kenya to be able to kind of come from a point of like trying to educate people and trying to help them make sustainable choices without necessarily like pushing product. So it operates both kind of as a learning resource and a service. The idea is to kind of create a space where you can practice sustainability in different ways. So, for example, through like hosting clothes swaps with you and your friends, or just general clothes swaps that I would love to collaborate with quite a few people, because that's becoming a super popular thing in Nairobi, which I love. And it also kind of has like a community behind it as well, which I'm hoping to kind of turn into like a membership, let's say. So you have a space in which if you wanted to rent an outfit, you know, because I find myself in that situation quite a bit where I need an outfit for an occasion, and maybe I've kind of been around the shops, but I also, you know, just because I don't want to be an impulse buyer, I want maybe to like just borrow something from someone's wardrobe and kind of like return it. Yeah. So the infrastructure that is kind of in existence, I would say is kind of a really great one, but maybe not entirely accessible. I honestly just came across the application for to volunteer in Copenhagen kind of like a week before it's due, which always kind of like happens to me. But I was really happy that they reached back to me, and I was able to kind of spend those 3 days in that space, which I feel really kind of pushed a lot of kind of my thinking, I would say. I think when you're working in something that's kind of new and kind of niche, I think you really have to take risks and put yourself out there and kind of, I mean, a lot of people could not believe when they were like, they thought I was like studying in Milan or studying in London, and that's how I got here. I'm like, no, I literally took a flight from Nairobi to come and be able to experience this. And luckily also I have the privilege to like be able to like afford it as well. So my whole thing and thinking about when it comes to infrastructure is that you really have to kind of like open those doors for yourself, basically. I think whenever you get the chance to kind of just participate, and there's a lot of very strong organizations that are there. So the Global Fashion Agenda, which is now the Global Fashion Summit, is one of them. I think they are the pioneers, I would say, of the conversation, and they're really concerned with actionable change, I would say, which is why I really wanted to kind of get into that space, because they deal with everything from kind of like what's happening in the space of fabrics and what's happening in the space of brands, but I guess also what's happening in the space of policy, which I think also is the most crucial thing when it comes to sustainability. I think a lot of the infrastructure favors brands that are not necessarily producing sustainably, that are not necessarily transparent in their supply chains. And the more that we can just highlight and kind of be in those spaces, I think the further we can push this agenda. I think there are definitely a lot of strong brands when it comes to the infrastructure that's in Africa now. I think there are a lot of strong brands and figures who are doing the work, which I love. I mean, there's Wildlife Works, there's Lilibert, there's Suave K. Like, they're really strong in kind of even focusing on kind of tackling one thing, and kind of taking that to the level that it kind of needs to be. I think though that a lot of those brands also heavily rely on outside influences to kind of operate and kind of exist. I think with sustainability, there's kind of no, and we're obviously in the era of cancel culture, there's no kind of saying you're running a sustainable brand without showing people how you're running that sustainable brand. And you need the certification, whether it's for your cotton, whether it's for your silk, depending on whatever, upcycling. You need to be able to show people whether it's like I'm using these natural fibers or I'm kind of I'm using waste, and this is like the offset of my carbon footprint as a brand. So I like that those forces are working together. I think that nothing really can happen in isolation. So I think people need to kind of like, kind of follow the blueprint that these brands are setting out, because it's just, there's no way that we can push the agenda further if we're not actually all in alignment, if that makes sense. So one of the most exciting projects that I've been a part of this year is definitely being able to be the local team coordinator for Slow Fashion Kenya. I think there's a lot of kind of good work that the Slow Fashion organization is doing. They currently started off as Slow Fashion Season, and now the organization has been certified to be an NGO, which I think is amazing. The reason why I say it's one of the most exciting projects is kind of in the last 4 years, and kind of also with being in Copenhagen and stuff, I consistently feel like certain voices are being left out of the slow and sustainable fashion movement. Why that concerns me is kind of because the more removed people feel from something, the more, kind of will still consistently be fighting things to do with like mindless consumption, and kind of also people not knowing like what kind of brands to support and for what reasons. Whether it's organizations like So Fashion Movement, Global Fashion Agenda, Fashion Revolution, please, I really encourage, whether you're a brand, whether you're a consumer, to kind of just visit their websites and kind of, get a bit more informed about what it is that you can do, and kind of in your own time. I actually participated, and this is even after my detox from fast fashion. I participated in a slow fashion movement maybe about a year ago, 2 years ago, and it's just a month of not buying. Just 1 month, no consumption at all. And I think, we're really talking about like 4 weeks, 30 days, I think if people are able to just like challenge themselves to kind of think about even the budget on spending on clothing, because I'm like, literally we are at the point as consumers and brands where it's so normal to buy clothes almost every day or every week, and that for me is kind of like, I actually would call it toxic, because I'm just like, what relationship do you have with your clothes that you find the constant need, to be like, oh, what I have in my wardrobe is not enough, I need to like go out and get more, or something was posted on Instagram and I must have it. That mentality is kind of like killing us all. So yeah, just, I always say, sign up wherever you can, you know, whatever organization you like as well, because it's really like such a preference thing of like, do I really want to like go cold turkey and do a whole month of not buying? Like, I'm not saying that's for everyone, but I'm just like, you still have like so many other ways you can participate. I mean, like, even if you actually have that kind of thinking of like, I really need a new top, like have a clothes swap or attend, you know. Also be able to figure out kind of that thing of like your purchasing power, and really know like once you like release that money, it's going into an organization that you really want to back and that you really want to support. I'm not saying don't buy at all, but I'm just saying it would be good if more consumers would understand the relationship that they do have with their clothing, and just let's figure out this waste problem, because the planet is dying and it's kind of scary to watch, you know. Yeah. The fashion industry actually used to be, if I'm not wrong, 1980s, the second largest kind of industry in the Kenyan economy. I can slowly see that we're getting back to a place where manufacturing is coming back into Kenya. I think the thing we really kind of need to focus on at this point definitely feels like just how we're going to handle the policy surrounding that. Because I think that the West, and the data supports that, the East is kind of saturated with production. And because of how kind of fragile it is, I will call it fragile, and the kind of problems that they've been having, i.e. when you go on now to Remake Our World website and organization, even just on their social media, there's a huge thing that they consistently push for all year round, which is like for brands to sign an accord that protects the garment workers. If those brands don't sign the accord, which it's looking like some of them will not be able to, it means they'll have to shut down production there completely. And I hate to say this, but where's the next best affordable place to manufacture? It's looking like it's going to be Africa. If we end up in the situation that they are in places like Bangladesh, with factories collapsing, with people in them, I think that would be detrimental. We won't even be talking about sustainable fashion then. We'll literally be talking, it'll now be completely a human rights issue. So if we are not able to safeguard and kind of put the structures and the policies in place that actually protect people who make our clothes, I think it will be super detrimental to actually the whole continent, yeah, one way or another. Because right now we're seeing so much, even just in East Africa, in Uganda, Rwanda, all of these places, brands are coming up. But again, it's like, how do we know that these people, that there's transparency in these supply chains, that these people are being protected, that these people are making like living wages, as we're saying? Because often what will happen is that we're in the capital city right now, and people are gonna travel to kind of get these jobs, and when they get here, the carpet is like completely ripped from under them. And for me, I don't find that to be justice for clothes to be made. I think it's kind of a very wrong thinking. I am very surprised that we have gotten to this place where big brands that everyone owns are using child labor. Like, the situation is kind of like very disheartening, and which is kind of, when I got into fashion, that was the first thing that I had to address. And then I just couldn't be like unseeing it, I couldn't just be like, oh, that's not my problem. I was just like, if this is happening, someone needs to do something about that. And I'm not a savior, I don't have a savior complex, but I think we just have to leave this world better than we found it. That's really what I have to say about that. Yeah. I always tell everyone though, like legit, if Louis Vuitton calls me tomorrow, I'm out. I'm out of here. If any Paris fashion brand calls me, we make them sustainable, man. They have the money to do it, so the budget is there. I'd even cancel all my fashion shows for the year and just like make the brand, like, do you know what I mean? I'm just like, and what I've actually realized and what was really great about being in Copenhagen is just like really seeing from the outside. It may not look like these brands are super passionate, but it's really the people, the leaders who are there, who dictate everything. So for me, I'm like, definitely the brands who can afford it, we should not even be having a discussion about sustainability or not. And I hate to kind of say it, but it is the truth. I think all luxury brands are inherently sustainable, just purely because they don't mass produce, you know? I mean, $1,000 dress, like you really only need to make like 20 of those, you know what I mean? And you've made your money back. I don't think that there's a whole agenda one needs to be pushing.